Magnus is the reigning champion. He's in good form this tournament. Seems like each day Magnus gets better. Back to business for Denis. Back to D4. We've seen this in the previous games. And Magnus seemed a little bit upset at the opening last game. This game's different. White plays same-ish variation with A3. So we have a dynamic kind of position. I think this is a good idea for Denis to get the position more dynamic and not so boring, Yovi.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't want any rook and 4 pawns against rook and 4 pawns. So that's why we're seeing Denis. Actually, he's heeding the words of wisdom from us all. He's just saying, you know what, I'm going to try and establish a big center. And we'll see whether that pays off, as Magnus just establishing his pawn structure, everything tight, compact for the time being. But now it's going to be a question of castling and getting that light squared bishop onto the long diagonal.
There was a game played a couple of days ago between two of the top American players, Caruana and Wesley, and they had this position, and Wesley was black and ended up winning a very long, complicated game. I wonder if both players are familiar with that game because it was just played recently, or if it was too recent and they're not paying attention to other tournaments that are going around. Usually, guys at this level, they know another 2,700 players are playing, and they're ready, and they're really well prepared. And in that game, and in this game, Magnus is going to play knight A5 and bishop A6 and rook C8.
Yeah, exactly. And just go for that weak pawn there that's completely alone and undefended. So this is the typical, what we call the Nimzo-Indian plan. You put pressure against this, whereas white has got all the pieces on the other side of the board, and we could be seeing liftoff there. You don't really care about a pawn. It's all about the attack and the flow.
Yeah, black wants to win those isolated queenside pawns. That's what Magnus did. He played knight A5, putting pressure on C4. Bishop A6 is coming, rook C8, and white's going to play on the king side and the center by pushing there and trying to get an attack. And I think this is what Denis has to do, is get this kind of complex position, possibly sacrifice a pawn, and try to get Magnus thinking early to a very complicated position.
Yeah, exactly. And this is actually what we're going to be seeing right now. So a big decision on the board, take the pawn, or do you want to be doing something else? I personally would capture, because that pawn structure is very beautiful. And now there's nothing you can do about that c-pawn. It is gone for good. So what you do instead is you start to just either expand, or you start to initiate some kind of pins.
Yeah, white's going to have to play on the center and the king side, take advantage of Magnus's uncastled king. Magnus is like, I'm solid, I'm going to win the c-pawn. This is a Magnus type of position, and Denis has to make the game double-edged, complicated, sacrifice a pawn, attack Magnus's king, and try to get Magnus in time trouble. So far, Magnus playing really quickly, as is Denis. They both seem to understand the ins and outs of the position. But yeah, the c-pawn's a goner. Magnus is going to take that soon. The only question is, will Magnus castle first or leave his king on E8?
Yeah, and also Denis has to play very accurately right now, because one of his most important pieces is that light squared bishop. You want to preserve it. You don't want to be allowing bishop takes pawn and then seeing the trade happen, because that is one great attacker. So it's a good move is perhaps to lift up the rook so you're prepared to move away. Other moves that have been tried is to develop that dark squared bishop and set up a pin. But you shouldn't go into battle without a sword. You need to know what you're doing as white in this position.
Yeah, Denis doesn't want to trade pieces. Of course, as you pointed out, if Magnus takes on c4, he'll take with the bishop, getting rid of white's two bishops. Denis can move the rook off of f1, so the bishop can retreat. Denis can also play bishop g5 here, and instead he plays another aggressive move, f4, wants to play e5 and start attacking Magnus's king. Magnus looks a little disturbed by f4, a very aggressive move. I really like the way this game is going for Denis. He doesn't have a better position, but he has the kind of position that I think leads more to wins and losses than the draws and slightly worse positions that he was getting in the first match.
Exactly. It marks a change of style from Denis. He's just saying, hey, I'm not going to go down without a fight. No more groveling for me in an inferior endgame. And now after castles, we are going to be seeing maybe from Denis, yay, he's going gung-ho as he just starts to launch an attack against Magnus's king. And, well, Magnus saying there will be no pin in town as that G5 square is covered.
Yeah, Denis wanted to play bishop G5 and knight H5 and E5, and Magnus is stopping bishop G5. We could see some sacrifices this game, Yovi. We could see some attacks against Magnus's king. Can Magnus defend, or is Denis going to break through on the king side? Denis thinking about his different options. Should he play E5? Should he do a rook lift? He does the rook lift. Rook F4. He wants to play E5. He wants to play rook H4. He wants to play knight H5. Wants to attack on the king side. Magnus quickly takes the pawn on C4. Magnus wants to trade pieces. Magnus could take either way on C4. They both look reasonable. Magnus is a little unsure, decides to take with the rook, putting pressure on the D4 pawn. Magnus won his pawn, that doubled C pawn. White has the initiative on the king side. Magnus looks pretty perturbed. He looks like he's unhappy with developments. Denis looks cool and calm. The engine says White's better. It likes White's attack. Can he prosecute the attack and get on the scoreboard, or is Magnus going to win and draw again, which he's done every match so far in this event?
Exactly. You know what I'm going to say? Actually, this is a game for two results. Now, not going to be a win or a draw. Mm-hmm. Actually, the position has gone so bold, so crazy, that either Black is going to hold the defense and win, or Denis is going to crash through. Now here, I got to say, you got to be a bit careful because there are sacrifices in town. There is a bishop takes pawn in the air, followed by some destruction of the king side. And now it is really critical for Magnus. Magnus needs to take some time out to protect his king, but Magnus not feeling happy with his position.
No, Magnus doesn't have that good poker face he usually has. He's gesticulating wildly. Looks like he's unhappy with his position. Looks like Denis is attacking, playing the right style. Magnus seems pretty unhappy with the situation. It's actually typical of this line in the Nimzo. White sacrifices the C pawn and plays for an attack. So it seems completely normal. But Magnus thinks that things have worked out in Denis's favor, that Denis has the advantage. And boy, Magnus really looks forlorn. This is the most unhappy Magnus has looked in the EWC. White's position isn't winning by any means. The engine says Magnus' position is fine. Magnus just doesn't like it.
No, Magnus not entirely happy with his position. But okay, it's not bad. He just has to make sure that there are no sacrifices in town. I mean, one natural thing is that the queen and the rook, they are on the same diagonal. So if you do move the knight backwards, then the rook will have to move. And there we're seeing Magnus, well, he's spending some time, and this is entirely understandable because where do you go with the knight? Do you go towards the right, towards the king, or do you go in a different direction? Either way, the problem is that, okay, he moves towards the center. Okay, well, this is an interesting move. Okay, oh, the engine's is saying...
Engine doesn't like anything, although it was a good idea to attack that rook on H4. The question is White simply going to move the rook and keep the initiative? Or is Denis going to move his queen into the territory on G4, H5 and continue making threats against Black's king?
Yeah, you know, I think that 3 is the magic number when it comes to attack. And that's exactly what Denis is building up. I mean, it's very natural, I got to say, to move it. Okay, I was going to say move the queen in. And now here, not the best move. But big threat in town. Bishop takes pawn. Now, one thing that I would be tempted to do, just because I'm a chicken and I don't like being attacked, is actually rook takes bishop. I was thinking about
sacrifice the exchange.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing that when if the queen were kind of come in that direction. But maybe this is just me being desperate. No, it happens.
Magnus heard you.
Okay.
Double exclam. Good job, Yovi.
Well, we have to show why this could be a good move. So if you capture with the queen, then there are some forks in town. So let's have a look. Queen takes rook. Now, first up, you can't jump in there because the queen will actually come and take the pawn on H6. Well, that's not the best move.
Well, Queen F6, the engine still says it's okay because White's pieces are all attacked.
Okay.
This is too complicated for a non-engine.
Well,
all the pieces are attacked. If you trade queens, then both rooks are attacked.
Still, looks like it's actually okay for Black, but it appears that Black had something better. But I just got to say that there's so many ideas of the knight dropping back, the knight jumping in, and suddenly the situation has turned completely. because black has neutralized white's attack. So I don't think you want to be capturing with the queen. If you capture with the rook, then...
There's another fork.
Oh, it's relentless. Beautiful move, beautiful move. And after the queen moves, knight takes rook, and it's already, I'm going to say, better for black, courtesy of being extra material up.
Yeah, rook g4, not a very precise move from Denis. Magnus takes advantage of it by sacking on c1, a move that you predicted. Now Denis is thinking a long time. It's one of the first double X-clan moves of the match, and it's looking good for Magnus right now.
Yeah, but what a move. And now the knight comes in and starts attacking the queen, the rook, and it's going to be very difficult for Danis now as he does go down a pawn. And what a beautiful shot there from Magnus. So quick, rook takes bishop. Just seeing those tactics, those forks, almost instantly.
Yeah, almost as quickly as you saw it. Always sacrifice the exchange, one of my favorite rules. Now is Magnus going to play queen g5 and try to trade queens, or queen f6? He's got to move his queen somewhere towards his king before white plays something like knight h5 and f6. Queen f6 defending g7, attacking the d4 pawn with check. Magnus is a pawn up. Denis is trying to attack. The engine says Magnus is better. It loved his exchange sacrifice. He got the exchange back. Now, Denis obviously overlooked the exchange sacrifice, taking a lot of time to figure out the ins and outs of the position. And now Denis, as per usual this match, has a lot less time, not a recipe for success.
No, not a recipe for success, but I mean, the choices are really unpleasant here because first up, do you want to put your rook behind its own pawn? And this is going to allow the black knight to infiltrate. Also, I would be tempted to go with my rook, with the black rook, and try and take an open line. Knowing Magnus, he might just simply try and swap off queens and just argue that, hey, he stands better.
But his knight e3 worked out so well before, maybe he wants to play knight e3 again. So knight c4, threatening knight e3, the same queen and rook fork with the queen and rook in reverse positions. You don't see that very often. Instead, was rook c8 played, or that's analysis? Oh, that's analysis. Okay. So, yeah, Magnus is still thinking. It seems like the logical moves are rook c8, taking the open file, or knight c4. But as you pointed out, Magnus might want to trade queens, g5, and the engine doesn't like it. The engine says he shouldn't play queen g5. The d4 pawn's not attacked anymore. So here comes rook activity. And this is a two-result game. It was win or lose, but now it's win or draw for Magnus. Magnus is still a pawn ahead. White doesn't have much compensation. White has the active rook, but black has the extra pawn. Black's king is really safe. So far, things have worked out in Magnus's favor since he sacrificed the exchange.
Yeah, and there is some compensation for Denis here, I gotta say. You know, the active rook, that's annoying for starters. And it's not gonna be very easy for the black rook to get into the game. So natural moves that you really want to be playing is like coming in with your rook, taking control over the open line. But this is gonna be met with ideas like the knight's coming in, the pawn takes pawn. I mean, and the white rook can just be really awkward. So we see Magnus instead just anchoring his knight to the middle of the board. And yeah, but what is a good move for white to start to hold it together?
Yeah, if I was white, I would be attacking those B and D pawns. I see my engine friend wants to play A4, A5 and trade off and try to draw the position. But I like black's position. Magnus is not only a pawn up, Magnus has that beautiful knight on D4. Denis, not to be outdone, wants to reposition his knight to D5, which takes a while, but the knight on D5 is going to be really strong for white. Unfortunately, Denis has a couple of weak pawns on A3 and E4. Magnus plays knight B5. The engine doesn't like the way either side is playing now. Both sides have a lot of pawns that are loose. It likes knight C3, attacking the E4 pawn, which not only wins a pawn, but it defends the D6 pawn, then Magnus will have a passed D pawn, and probably with that a winning position. things are going in Magnus's favor the last few moves, Yovi.
Exactly. And I just love the way that Magnus quickly went on that knight odyssey. He didn't even pause. And the whole idea is that, yes, you give up one pawn, but once the knight grabs that pawn in the middle, it becomes an octo knight, and it's the white king that is in serious danger. I mean, you almost have to go on the complete passive. And if you have to do that with your rook and your knight, then there's no way that you're going to be holding this position a pawn down. So what can Denis do to hold on? He's got less than 1 minute 32 seconds on the clock. The king comes up, but
there's a move I wouldn't have thought of.
Exactly. He's giving up the pawn with check.
Yeah, not only is Magnus on an Odyssey, he was also on The Simpsons with Homer. That's how he knows so much about the Odyssey. And one of the few players who's been on a cartoon about chess. Magnus is so famous. The Simpsons were lucky to have him. He was better than Homer, and looks like he's better than Lazavik this game. Another endgame. This time they have knights. Magnus has 2 connected pass pawns in the center. It's a matter of technique. Magnus has an extra minute and a half on the clock. Somehow the game went from complicated, double-edged tactics to Magnus figuring it out, sacking the exchange, getting rid of Denis's attack, and going into a winning endgame. Typical Magnus. He's really in good form this match, Yovi.
Totally. And look at Magnus go. He's going to start just advancing his pawns in the middle. He doesn't even have to be precise. Either one will do. And now I'm expecting the other pawn to start attacking. Let's get going. What should you do with passed pawns? You should push him. Even you can allow a check with the knight, because the king will step up and attack the white rook. Forktown does not work for Denis. And look at that. He just does it. He's cold-blooded. He's calculated it all out.
Yeah, it's looking bad for Denis. Those pawns are too strong. This game's not going to go much longer. Denis down to a minute. An auspicious start for Denis in the second set. Brilliant game from Magnus. Brilliant exchange sacrifice. Great endgame technique. Played faster. Just more of the same.
Yeah. Magnus showing us he is number one. And I like the way that he's setting up the tricks, because here I would be doing this. Knight takes pawn, but Magnus doesn't even need to push his pawn. He just pins the knight, and that knight is going to fall. He takes it. Okay, well, maybe there's still some kind of chance for Denis, you know, if he manages to swap off all the pawns. A rook and knight against a rook is going to be a draw, but to be honest, that is just a wishful thought.
No, Magnus brilliantly defends his g5 pawn. He doesn't care about the a pawn. He'll win that later. He just wants to make sure he keeps his 2 pawns. Rook f5. Magnus must not have seen that, because he seemed upset about that move. He really tried hard to keep his g pawn. Rook f5 was the last chance. Magnus should still win the rook and knight when pawn versus rook and 2. But it's not so simple with just 1 pawn on the side of the board.
No, exactly. Knights are actually really difficult. It's really difficult to defend those rook pawns, because now the knight is going to get chased around, and now the white king is going to step forward. That's the only chance. And the black king, Denis, going for a different technique.
ZUGZWANG.
Yep.
Yeah, there's no move in that position. Any move white makes will make his position worse. He was in ZUGZWANG. Really nice technique for Magnus. We say that a lot. And time advantage on the board, outcalculated. I mean, it was a good try by Denis. It just looked like when he played rook g4, he wasn't really in that position. He missed the exchange sacrifice, and Magnus took over after that.
Yeah. A great showing there from King Magnus, as our crowd call him. And what a game it was. You know, rook takes bishop being the killer move. And the way that he navigated those complications, he looked a little bit flustered at the beginning, but once he got going, he won, and he takes the advantage in the second set.